Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of PR Explored. PR Explored is the PR podcast where we delve into trends and topics related to public relations. I'm your host, Michelle Garrett, a PR consultant and writer, and my guest today is Kristina Markos. Welcome, Kristina.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yay! I'm so glad you're here. We're going to be talking about soft skills and why they're important in a PR career. But first, I would love for you to tell us a little bit about you and your background and just anything you would like to share. And I will put a few links in here while you're telling us about yourself so that people can follow you on LinkedIn and see look at your work.
Yeah, that'd be great. So I'm Kristina Markos. I'm an associate professor and also the chair of the graduate program in communications at Lasell in Newton, Mass. And I'm also the co-founder of GenSpark Solutions, which is a consultancy that is targeted mostly in communications departments or agencies to onboard the next gen of communicators and also train managers or higher ups on how to work out intergenerational differences because things have changed so much and there really needs to be a third party involved. I'm an agency person. I've only really worked in agencies prior to becoming a professor. And I've worked in Miami, Florida. I've worked in Chicago. I had my own shop for a little bit, and then I've been out here in Boston. So my experience kind of really runs the coasts and from the Midwest and agency versus higher ed. So I'm kind of all over the place with it.
Yeah, you mentioned before we started that you're from Cleveland originally.
Yes,
So
originally.
and I'm in Columbus, so Ohio.
OH.
I love Cleveland, so I love to hear that. So I saw something that you wrote, which kind of started me thinking about this. And I feel like, obviously there's a lot of emphasis on technology and AI and analytics and yada yada. Sure, okay. But I think when we're, talking about day-to-day, work, I feel like the interpersonal skills and the softer skills are just as important, if really not more important, because if you can't get along at work and collaborate and, you're not gonna be able to really use your technology skills. So I think that's, what we're talking about today.
100%.
So, let's talk a little bit more about what you made some predictions, I guess. And I mean, I kind of take that with a grain of salt as far as when people ask me for a prediction, it's like, who knows? Like, we really don't. How
Yeah.
do we know? How can we know? But you did have some things to say, and I'll put a question up here for us to chat about. So, in your predictions, you talked about, how skills like listening, presenting, collaboration, curiosity, engagement, how does that make a difference for candidates? Because I think obviously a lot of people are looking for work right now. So how does that help them? Why do you think those are important?
Yeah, so I love that you say you take predictions with a grain of salt because it's funny. The blog that you're referring to was I'm on the board of directors for the PR Club here in New England, which is kind of like a PRSA, but we're called the PR Club. And I was very careful to not step on the toes of what's going to hit the industry because we're in a time of transition in my thought. But one thing that will never go out of style or always be true is that if you're a communications person, if you're studying communications, you work in the field, you have to be a good communicator, right? And so I will read resumes sometimes, like for my students, or even if I'm hiring at my consultancy, or if a professor wants to work with us. And one of the soft skills people lead with sometimes is a skilled communicator. Okay. And in my head, I'm like, what does that mean? So underneath that, I would ask, can you listen well? Can you listen to instructions? Can you follow instructions? Can you pick up nuance of maybe a culture of a group of people or how leadership hints at what they want done? Are you able to pick up on nonverbal cues? Do you have curiosity about the work that you're doing? One thing about PR that I always try to stress to my students is you're learning public relations, how to do the craft, but you also have to learn an industry, right? So if you're a PR person in finance, you have to learn the finance industry. If you're a PR person in law, you have to learn legal. So you have to be curious about an industry, what it stands for, its history, how it makes an impact. And those are the soft skills that you can develop if you really pay attention to it and you read, books about being an effective communicator, or you practice with your friends or your family. But if not, you are going to quickly probably deny yourself a promotion or deny yourself a position.
Mhm.
'Cause I believe they're that important.
Yeah. No, and I see this in action. Again, we were chatting a little bit beforehand, and I was in a meeting with someone brought their intern, a client brought their intern, and they
Mm,
yawned openly during the meeting. Just a big old and you can't. It's just subtle things like that. I
yeah.
mean, obviously, that's not the end of the world, but it's just that kind of. I don't know. It's just kind of a lack of understanding how that appears when you do that kind of thing,
Mhm.
and, again, like, working with young people and also, as a mother of a couple of young, younger people, I see how it's just a different attitude, and they honestly don't understand sometimes, they don't even know that this could be problematic, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with that. I think also too, this next sector that's coming up, and even the ones that are in their first couple years of their job, or even grad school, they're in the algorithm space, right? Where
Mhm.
everything that they're scrolling and clicking on and reading maps to what they're already interested in and what they believe. So before that, right? Like I went to school, I was in high school, college, grad school before the algorithms took over and you had to seek out information, right? I mean, there was Facebook, there was Twitter, of course. I'm in my 40s, but it wasn't like how it is now, where every perspective that you have is echoed back to you. So I
Yeah.
think for young people, particularly, it's important that we force them at the undergraduate level or even in their internship or even their first couple years of the job to learn how to take perspectives, right? So like
Mhm.
I said, they're learning an industry on top of their communications craft,
Yeah.
and that part of it often gets lost for them, and they're like, wait a minute, I thought public relations was unboxing on Twitter. I mean, I'm sorry, not Twitter. Ugh. Unboxing on TikTok,
Yeah.
or opening PR packages. And the first 6 weeks of my entry level PR course, I have to say that's not what this is, right?
Mhm.
And I think that portion of perspective taking and thinking of storylines and what your audience might think about a topic or a brand is, it really, really has to be taught. And then once they learn that for PR, often they can translate into interpersonal stuff, which is kind of cool. PR is kind of a really cool field,
Yeah.
if you're struggling with learning interpersonal communication.
Yeah, I mean, I think, it's really important because obviously we're building relationships, right? We're
Mhm.
building relationships with our coworkers, our clients, and also with, the media, with industry analysts, whatever industry you're in, there's probably different audiences that you have to, build relationships with, and it's always gonna be part of public relations regardless of, any technology that may enter into the picture. I feel like
Mhm.
this is what we've kind of maybe lost sight of just a little bit. The tech has taken the spotlight over the softer skills, and I
Yep.
feel like, in my opinion, the softer skills have always made a huge difference because, again, if you're not able to collaborate and get along, and I don't know how anyone is going to hold a job, given that it's very competitive these days as well.
Yeah, it is. It is. It's not easy right now.
No, so I think these kind of things, and these are things, again, it might not be something that it even occurs to them, that this is
Mhm.
something that might help them stand out. So, let's talk about, presentation skills. So, I feel like when I went to school, which of course, was not yesterday, I don't know that we had as much emphasis on this, but I feel
Mm.
like it's very important because you need to be able to stand up in a meeting and talk about, your work, and maybe you need to give presentations at an industry event or, what have you. So let's talk a little bit about this. And I'd love to hear how you're if you're giving students experience with this, and then, why is it important? But let's talk about both those things.
Yeah, I mean, we absolutely do, and almost every university that I've been at. So, I'm at Lasell. I was an adjunct at Lasell for a while. Now I'm there full time. And we have a connected learning philosophy where everything that we do, we have to tie back to what industry requires. So, we're lucky. Our students are lucky. Parents, if there's anyone here thinking of where to send your child, I would consider Lasell, just simply because we do have that connected learning philosophy. But even beyond Lasell, every other school I've been at or worked with does tend to focus on presentation nowadays. One thing I will say, though, is that we know the employers want that. We know clients want that. We know that that's how you win business, right? Or
Mhm.
even if you're asking for promotion, oftentimes you're going to have to present your case. Like, I did this, I led this, this is what it yielded. So presentation skills are going to be with you throughout your career. However, there's with the younger folks, they're very used to like voice to text
Mhm.
or just kind of putting stuff through on a Slack channel, or typing things out. It's very rare that they can imagine that they're going to have to get up and explain the value of a campaign or their work, or even if they're at an agency to try to, win a client over. I don't think that they can really envision it until they're in that moment, but I think it's very important to be able to present, because otherwise, how do you explain your unique value or the creativity that your agency or your team brings to the table, and how do you win business otherwise?
Yeah. No, and answering questions kind of on your feet sometimes, you
Mhm.
don't always know what people are gonna ask, and, obviously, when you work, in media relations, you have to kind of prep clients for media interviews, and we don't always know what the reporters are
Yeah.
gonna ask. So it's kind of a similar, I don't know, skill, I guess, is be able to think on your feet and respond, and also know, like, when to stop talking, when you're saying too much, when you're just talking to kind of fill the void or what have you. So I think that's only something you can get good at through practicing. Practice makes perfect. I know that sounds, but I don't, we've heard that a million times, but it's really true. And I feel like if you're giving the students that opportunity and maybe they're getting it in an internship or something, that's really going to help them stand out and help them kind of hone those skills.
I actually did a really cool workshop, I guess, experience-based lesson, whatever you want to call it, where I give students in my 200 level PR class. So these are sophomores. This is like after they've learned how to do basic media writing, then they come to me. So they don't have too much experience, but I will give them, let's say, a brand that's, and we did this with Crocs when they came out with the M&Ms type Croc. This
Mhm.
was fairly recently. And, I did this thing of like, okay, if you are trying to get a parent interested in these Crocs versus a preteen, right? So same product, same message, same campaign. How do you reach them and what do you say? Right.
Mhm.
And that stumps them. It really does, because that's that perspective taking piece of like, well, it's the same thing, right? And I go, and you're not selling it because this isn't an ad. You're not in advertising. But
Yeah.
what do you say to get the buzz going, to get people interested? Because there's two different demographics. You're going to have the preteen kid who's like, these are really cool. I want these M&M Crocs. I'm going to go ask my parents if I can put them on my Christmas list or holiday list. Then you have you have parents where maybe this shows up in their feed, or they read news coverage of a top 10 list of things to get their kids for the holidays. Two different messages, and you're going to pitch them totally different ways, and you're going to have different content and different channels. And so when I start to push that on my students, like in a class and a thought exercise of like, you in this field will be required to think about how you're going to take the same story and translate it and tell different parts of the story depending on who you're trying to hit. And, that exercise alone, I think, is invaluable. And I think it does help them with presentation skills. It helps them think about their audiences. It helps them be better PR people. So I plan to continue that type of workshopping for as long as it's effective.
Yeah. So, and do they have to get up and present to, did you say that?
No, I just sort of put them on the spot, which they might not like, but I'll just say, so what do you think? And if they stare at me, then I'll be like, I'm going to stay with you. I'm like, I don't usually let them off the hook. Like, and then I'll move on to another person and another person. And usually at
Yeah.
the end of that, I'll say, you'll see how you 3 people or 4 people, for example, if I have a smaller set, you all saw the same challenge and approached it differently. I go,
Yeah.
that's communications, and that's the field. Like, you're going to have a client, you're going to have a story. Everyone sees a different part of it as being valuable or interesting. And then on top of it, you have to dissect how your audience interprets it. But you can't like
Right.
lecture through that, right? You can't like say, read this chapter on it. You have to actually have them feel it.
Yeah. No, that's great. I love that. Because I feel like we just, assume that everybody knows how to do
Mhm.
everything, and they just
Mhm.
and they don't. I mean, like, if you just don't have the experience, and again, this generation thinks differently and approaches things a lot differently, and I think that's, again, I feel like there should be a little bit of give and take on both sides, because
Oh,
they
yeah.
need to adapt a little bit, maybe for a boss that's of another generation, and then the boss also has to be like, "Well, they bring these things to the table, and maybe there are other things, we can work on." So I
Mhm.
think that that's great that you do that with your clients through your firm. That's kind of what you do.
Yeah, so Jen Spark, it's funny, the reason that Rachel, who's my professor friend, and I, we launched this is that we were seeing consistent feedback on internship forms from the internship site supervisors. So she and I specifically, when we were working together, were very cognizant of teaching students how to have portfolios that had tangible, real products that they could show to an internship site or a job. Like, I made a press release, I did a competitive audit, things that they could hand in. But so the work, we never got complaints on work. Like, I never heard, really, very, very rarely, very select cases, I very rarely heard from an internship site, this student couldn't perform the work. But I did hear inappropriate during meetings, asks questions that are not appropriate for an intern. Like, for example, I had a student ask their manager why they didn't have an expense account, like why they themselves didn't. And and so I asked the student, like, where did you even come up with this? Like, where did you hear of interns getting expense accounts? And she's like, I don't know. I know, people in certain industries get one. And I was just wondering where my Amex was. And, and we heard that over and over and over again. So it just got to the point where Rachel and I did a lot of research. We did a lot of interviewing about what the actual problems are, bridging communications gaps between the
Mhm.
generations. And so, yeah, that's how our consulting practice was born.
Yeah. No, I think that could be very, helpful, because, there's just a gap there. I don't know.
It is. It is. And I love, I have a good story about this. There is a meme going around that is very popular with young people. I've seen my students share it. I've even seen it on LinkedIn, where it says, somebody's making kind of like a rotten face, and it's like the face you make when somebody makes double your salary and can't turn a Word doc into a PDF. Okay. So I do this presentation, I do this workshop, and I'll bring that up, and I'll say to the young people in the room, have you ever felt like this? And they're like, yeah, oh, I totally resonate with that. I get that. I have to do all this tech stuff at my job. Then, somebody's making twice, 3 times my salary. So then I'll pick up another slide and show what it was like for a woman in the boomer generation or older Gen X when they were coming out of school, and how hard it was and how little money they made, or, sexism in the workplace, or fax machines, or, all these issues that I'm not saying are completely gone, but just like a harder lifestyle. Right. And I said, so, maybe they earned that double salary, and the perspectives start to change a little bit. Like, right. Like, there's some
Mhm.
softening, there's some empathy, I guess, when you start flipping it that way.
Yeah, I feel like sometimes I sense a lack of kind of, I don't know if it's respect or just I don't think they totally are. They're just thinking about it from their own perspective. So when you can show them maybe, yeah, what
Right.
somebody went through to get where they're at, maybe they will think a little bit differently about it. So that's good.
Yeah, and on their side, I love what Gen Z is doing about kind of pushing back against hustle culture. I wish I'm an older millennial. I wish we had that. We had toxic grinding in the agency days, like in the early 2000s, mid 2000s when I came out.
Yeah.
You know, it's
Yeah.
12-hour, 13-hour days. Your
Yeah.
manager texting you at 7 p.m. You know, I remember I was in my first trimester with my first son and on a business trip, and you know, just trying not to let anybody know that I was expecting a child or that I was feeling nauseated because it was just like not a thing you spoke about, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And that has changed. I mean, and I love that about Gen Z. They are sticking up for themselves in terms of health, in terms of mental health,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and
Yeah.
and I think that that's great too. So I think there's a lot to be learned on both sides.
Oh, yeah. No, I definitely remember the day when I had to keep it a secret that I had
Mhm.
a baby,
Yeah.
because there was an occasion when somebody that I was gonna hire me found out I had an in-house, like, sitter for my son, but
Mm.
they didn't think that was good enough. They didn't want the baby in the house, like, if in case it made noise. I'm like, "Oh my gosh,"
My
like, now you
gosh.
have your baby on your lap, like
I
so thank
know.
goodness, it's yeah, that's a good thing.
It's a really
Yeah,
good
and
thing.
I remember the 7 a.m. to 7 p.m.,
Mhm.
agency days, and that was not, like, fun, so
No. No, it wasn't, but we
so,
made it.
yeah.
We made it. That's why we're doing a podcast
Well,
like
and
this
that's
now.
and that's
We have
there
stories
you
to
go.
tell. Yeah.
That's why you get paid the
Right.
big bucks, I guess, I don't know. Anyway, so kind of on this note, I think this dovetails nicely. It's like the ability to collaborate. And obviously, a lot of people are working remotely now,
Mhm.
much more. I mean, I wish that would have been a thing when I was younger. Is that the ability to even work remotely a day a week or something would have been great, and you kind of had to really fight for that back then. But yeah, I mean, now you're either remote or maybe you're in the office or a hybrid model or something like that, but you still have to be able to work with other people. If you're just trying to do everything on your own and kinda, go rogue or
Right.
just, you can't that doesn't really work very well.
Yeah, and I think communications is in such a cool spot. I was actually telling my students, I'm teaching a group of seniors right now who are graduating in May, and I told them, I'm like, you're at this time period where, you know, it's not siloed into like you are a news reporter, you are an advertiser, you are that, you know, people can just create content, they can work with influencers, they can do brand building. You can kind of switch in and out of fields now easier than even, you know, 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And we're teaching to that at Lasell. We're teaching our PR students design skills, right? We're teaching them analytics skills. We're teaching our journalism students how to um, maybe think about crisis comms, you know. So we're
Mhm.
doing that at LaSalle. We're kind of intermingling these skill sets. But with that, I would say collaboration is even more important, right? Because maybe you have a colleague that came out 10 years ago and is really, really, really in the trenches with crisis comms, and maybe you've just touched it. So you should know what you're good at, what you're not good at, and be able to raise your hand. I think one of the predictions I said in my blog that you were talking about earlier, it's something to the effect of being able to speak up. And I think, you know, that's a skill to be learned, that it is okay to say, I don't really understand this. I need more clarity around the goals. What are the expectations for me? Who could I shadow about this said issue? Right. And I think a lot of younger people, they've always, regardless Gen Z or not, younger people always feel insecure about speaking up. So that's the first step to collaboration for me, is, you know, speaking up and asking really good questions to lead to a more effective workspace.
Well, and I feel like, I don't know if you've experienced but I feel like in communications, marketing, PR, whatever role you're in, a lot of times there's a little bit of territorialism,
Mhm.
you know, and I guess I understand it, but also I feel like we could also get so much further, all of us, if we amplified each other's work, kind of leverage each other's work. Sometimes, PR creates content, sometimes the
Yep.
content team creates it and PR promotes it. Sometimes, and obviously social is in all of those,
Mhm.
plays in all of those realms. So I just feel like we could get so much more out of it if we understood a little bit more about, um, what each team is good at and how it works with what your team is doing, and there just be a more open-minded, um, approach to it, because the silos are really difficult, and I see that in my work, and I know that I've talked to a lot of people who, are in-house and experience it too, so.
Yeah, and I kind of wonder how long that's going to go on, because I'm seeing what's happening at the higher ed level, where in a lot of comm departments we're saying you want versatile communicators, right? Because,
Right.
you know, I have two former students who they're more like my younger sisters now. We're very close, but they use their comm degree to want to go into policy or, make some big sweeping changes in government. Because they're activist focused. They're that way, both of these young women. And they're doing it. And, one's in grad school, one's thinking about grad school, but you know, that student, that person, that professional is going to have to be on social media. They're going to have to be dealing with the press. They're going to have to do media training. They're going to have to do all of it. And they're probably going to also have to do marketing, right? To affect change and to get these conversations going that are so important on a national level.
Mhm.
And so I wonder, and I don't have the answer to this, but I do wonder what comm is going to look like, because the silos are sort of doing this anyway, and people are sort of bopping in and weaving it out anyway. So I'd love to see in 10 years, we should revisit this and see how people ended up, if they stayed siloed or didn't.
Yeah, I mean, and I have friends that are, in the job market, and they say the titles are also reflective of what you were just saying, and they're
Mhm.
kind of all over the place, like, the title might be, PR manager, but you're expected to do all these things that traditionally maybe a PR manager wouldn't do, or,
Right.
I work with a lot of like companies in the maybe 500 to 1,000 employee range, and there might be one person being, playing the marketing director role. And I mean, like, so they're tasked with doing all these things, and maybe they have, bring in outside help, but it's a lot, it's a lot is expected, and it's not very clear always what the title actually means. So
Right.
what are the job duties? And I think if you're looking, yes, the market is tight right now, but I still think you should be very clear and ask those questions about, what exactly you are charged with, overseeing, and what are you responsible for?
Yeah. Or how it will evolve. I tell my students all the time, 5 years is nothing. It sounds like a lot to you because, if you're 20 years old and they're thinking 5 years ago they didn't drive, right? But when you're 22 and 27, that goes by quick. And you can ask your managers and stuff like, where will I be in 5 years? How do I evolve my skill set? What part of this role do you see the most opportunity for someone with, young person energy or new fresh ideas? You absolutely should speak up. That's without a shadow of a doubt, in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think sometimes though, what I see with, younger pros is that they're the confidence, it's not quite
Mhm.
there yet, the feeling like it's okay to speak up and ask questions and add, offer ideas, or give or whatever. So, I think what you're saying is that they should try to have that confidence and feel like, that they should be speaking up,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
but maybe with a filter.
Maybe. Yes. Yes. Maybe.
Not asking about expense accounts on day 1,
Oh my
maybe.
gosh. It
That's
was, I mean, it's cute, right? But it's also like, for me, it gave me pause to think about what we do at the higher ed level need to be teaching. I mean, we do. And, I'm a mom too. I'm a mom of 3 boys, and they're Gen Alpha. So they're coming
Mhm.
up, right? They're coming up
Yeah.
right behind these guys. Um, but yeah, I mean, once my boys are out of here at 18, their professors are really the ones, if they go to college, that mold them. So, hearing from employers at the level that I was able to hear from them, and helping students navigate that process, and even what Rachel and I see with our clients, like, recruiting has different strategies for younger people. What companies are looking for a lot of times is, can I put you in a room with higher ups or clients, and feel confident that you'll be able to professionally engage in a conversation, right?
Mhm.
yeah, things are changing. It's neat to see both sides of it. I mean, I really enjoy seeing how
Mhm.
this stuff is shaken out.
Yeah. And I wanted to say too, if anyone has questions, please feel free to ask. Christina's happy to answer, and we'd love to address whatever questions you might have. Um, so speaking of questions, the next question is about asking questions, and you kind of alluded to this a few minutes ago. Um, you know, and clarifying by asking questions, because again, sometimes I think people are afraid to speak up, they're afraid to ask. I think they fear that it makes them look like not knowledgeable,
Mm,
not smart, or I don't whatever, but I feel like it's vital, and I feel like asking questions is actually a little bit of a superpower sometimes because people don't wanna ask, and
yeah.
honestly, how in the world are you ever gonna, learn or understand more if you don't ask questions?
So it's interesting. People's attention spans are also shorter. Right?
Mm,
So I
mhm,
think they miss people. I mean, even me, I mean, all of us, all of our attention spans are shorter. We get things in sound bites. We get, we click through things on headlines. We just want move, 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 move. You have like 6 tabs open at one time, your email's going off, your phone's going off. People are like this, right? All the time.
mhm, mhm.
So I think people have more questions now than ever because we're passively listening just because of the nature of how quick everything moves and how our attention is always fractured. Um, so I think that that's what's causing a lot of people being afraid of answering or asking questions. Excuse me. It's like, did I miss that? Did somebody else miss that?
Yeah,
I think it's because we're passive listening and we're not really engaging a lot fully. And I see that in my classes. I see that in business meetings. I mean, I'm sure you see it too. We all have fractured attention spans, and we have browsers open and tabs open and phones chiming. So yeah, I mean, I don't know if they're afraid to ask questions. There's more or less that I think everybody's sort of in a perpetual state of missing some information and sort of just
mhm,
relying that somebody else maybe picked it up. Um, but I would say it's to just own that. I would never feel a certain way about a colleague or a candidate or a new hire if they were like, I missed this portion of the conversation,
yeah.
or you said X, can we recap Y? I would never anticipate that someone would find that odd. They'd probably find it assertive.
Yeah, well, it's focus, right? I mean, you have to learn how to focus. I mean, that is something I think we all need to work on. And secondly, yeah, I think, if you sometimes even if you're listening and
Mhm.
engaged, paying attention, you have to hear it more than once, or
Yeah.
you have to hear it and then read it. So maybe there's a recap after the meeting of what was, or the class or whatever it is. So you kinda have to, use your resources also to find answers, but I just feel like for example, I feel like a lot of times PR is looked at as PR pros are looked at as order takers. So
Hmm.
write a press release, here's the order, like we're putting our order in.
Mhm.
And instead of maybe asking, well, is the press release the right vehicle for this
Right.
news or information? They just go off and be like, oh, I got to write another press release. Not that there's anything wrong with press releases. I absolutely do not think that. However, I just feel like, who are we trying to get the message out to? Is this the right vehicle for that? What messages? What are the key messages? Just asking kind of some key questions. Also measurement, like there's a lot of talk about measurement, but there's not a lot of talk about like benchmarking before you start
Yeah.
something new to see where we're here now. Well, we want to get here. There has to be some kind of a dialogue or questioning or conversation about what exactly we are trying to do. So I feel like without that, it's just kind of like we're just all rushing around and
Yeah.
doing stuff.
I mean, I think PR pros should absolutely have to take an introductory journalism course at some point because then you learn how to ask thoughtful questions. You ask, you are taught how to ask questions, and it's funny to me that we're so aligned with the media space. And some curricula does make you do it, some doesn't. But
Mhm.
I feel like every PR person at some point could benefit greatly from journalistic training in terms of asking questions and trying to read through the lines and
Yeah.
clarifying things.
Yeah.
It would just make us stronger.
Well, and I think some managers frown upon maybe like, "Oh, you're asking too many questions. Why are you asking all those questions?" I feel like that you have to be in an environment where that's encouraged, because I think it's actually a great thing when somebody asks questions, because
Yeah.
it means they are
Agree.
paying attention and they are engaged. They're thinking. Critical thinking is so
Critical
important. Like,
thinking, yeah.
yeah, and I when I studied PR, it was in journalism school. So I have a journalism degree, and so that was just the way it was where I went to school, and I was amazed at how that has changed because
Mhm.
kids got a communications degree and they don't, it's totally different now. Like they don't even, they look at you like, like it's just called different things now, integrated communications, or
Mhm.
it's not called the same things anymore. So but yeah, no, I had to write for the student newspaper. I had to be a journalist for a while, and I think even though I've never actually been like a professional journalist at a publication, I feel like that has served me well throughout my PR career, because I think like that now, and it
Yeah.
is thinking critically. It's not just taking the information at face value and saying, "Oh, okay, I'll go write the press." It's more like, well,
Yeah, it is.
what
I mean, it really is. Like, what do people wanna know, right? So, like,
right.
what I'll go back to my earlier example. What about these M&M Crocs do people wanna know? Do they wanna know how they were made? They don't, and this is where,
Yeah.
even when I teach my PR course, I'm like, you guys all know what an ad is. It's easy to spot an ad, but what you don't see is PR, because it's the figuring out the puzzle of what's the piece of the story that your audience wants to hear about that maybe isn't obvious, right? So that is the way that you get there, is by asking really good questions.
Yeah, no, I feel pretty passionately about that, and I feel like a lot of times, again, people are just, like, running around, and they're busy, and again,
Mhm.
they don't even maybe stop to think, like, why they are doing something, and that's why I feel like it's really important. And again, I've had people tell me that, when they did try to ask questions, sometimes, their manager or whoever just didn't think that was necessary, and they just kinda wanted them to go do the thing that they were asked to do, which, you know
Well, what's also interesting too, that again, I feel like career centers, or professors who are career oriented like I am, what we can do too is explain the art of reading people's bios in your organization. I know that sounds odd, but is figuring out intimately, like, what did somebody study? What do they do? How long have they been at the organization? Because sometimes somebody will have a question and they go to the wrong person, and maybe that's why they're getting shut down, or the question isn't appropriate. They just assume that the manager knows everything because they're the manager, right? So I think too that teaching young folks or new folks or folks that are just on board to your organization the art of, okay, here's like a company roster, here's everybody's detailed information and what they do and who you go to for certain things. I think that would be really effective in a lot of organizations.
Yeah, and I'm gonna put the next question up because I think, you've mentioned this a couple times, and I think this is really important too, just being curious. And I
Yeah.
remember when I first started, working like, real jobs, looking at the org chart and things like
Mhm.
that. Oh, okay, so this person reports to this person, and this division is charged with this, and, because we were organized by industries too.
Yeah.
So, at a technology company, you might be working with the automotive industry one day, and then maybe
Mhm.
6 months later, you're working with aviation, or you're, working with the entertainment industry, or, so what do you need to know about that? And then who within your organization. I like the idea of mentors, and I think
Yeah.
sometimes that's hard to find too. It's like your manager might not be the right mentor.
That's
I
right.
don't know that that's always the best person to look to for that, but mentorship maybe within another department at the company, or maybe within a professional organization like PRSA or something like that,
Mhm.
that's really helpful.
Yeah, and I think too, when you're looking at a professional, you're looking at many layers of that professional. So let's just say, if you're a woman, maybe you want to hear about women's issues in the workplace. If you're a PR professional and you want to get out of media relations, but you really like public affairs, you might want to go to somebody who's made that switch, right? So I think, when you're looking at yourself as a young developing professional, or if you manage those folks, you should be asking those questions of them too, of like, what part of your personality or your skill set do you want to invest in, and how can we set you up with materials and learning opportunities and learning and development to sort of grow that space for you. Um, I
Mhm.
also think too, with curiosity, our field is very bizarre. I mean, my husband, my husband is a teacher. He's a middle school administrator now. But I remember when we were dating, I swear for a year he didn't know what I could not like explain to him what I did for a living. I was like, I work in the financial industry, mostly in public relations, and at the time I was creating some content. And and he's like, but for what? Like, you're not a finance person. It's like he just didn't, he couldn't wrap his mind around it. Um,
No.
and so I think, yeah, that's a really important part for PR people to realize, is that you are also learning industries, and you might be working for 30 years. You might switch industries. You might work at an agency and work on a beverage client in the morning and a
Mhm.
hospital in the afternoon. So
Mhm.
it's
Mhm.
really important to know what you don't know and not be afraid to find people who do know and to talk to them.
Yeah, and sometimes after you've, worked in certain industries, you realize, "Hey, maybe that's not for me."
Right. Right. Or like that. I could not make that interesting if I tried.
I mean, I really have leaned into B2B. I mean,
Mhm.
in industries even within B2B, but just B2C versus B2B and how that's different because it
Yeah.
is a different kind of, approach to what you're saying. Because companies are buying in a different way than, you're the public, the
Yeah.
consumer. So I think it's, even that, and my daughter has a friend, she's in college, and, I was chatting because her friend is studying PR, and she was excited because she knew what B2B meant because she follows me, and she had seen
Oh,
me talking
good. That
about it.
works.
She
There you
was like
go.
her professor was like, "Wow, you really
Yeah,
got
that's
that."
impressive. I would be impressed with that.
Yeah,
Extra
so, I
credit
mean
points immediately.
but there's a difference, and so maybe you're doing a role that you enjoy, but it's in an industry maybe that you don't really it doesn't resonate with you or something like that, and those are all things that you'll learn as you go, and again, it's fine to change roles, it's fine to
Mhm.
try different things, even, like, sometimes if you get, and you work for a bigger company, sometimes you can even move within the company and try
Yeah.
different, roles and responsibilities out and different work in different industries, and I think it's really fascinating because that's something I didn't really understand when I went into it
Right.
either. I thought, "Oh, I just like to write, and I think this this will
Oh, I
be
know.
fun," and
The writing portion. Oh my gosh, the writing portion. If you wanted to be a writer, you went into journalism or PR. I mean, it was, that's what you did. But the other portion is, nobody, at least when I went to school, was saying, all right, now before you go to a job, before you go to an agency, you're going to look at their client roster and you're going to look at the press that client is getting. And this sounds so silly because I can't imagine today like anybody needing to explain that to me after 20 years. Like, that's like breathing now. But at the time I was just like, well, I can write anything. I'm a good writer. So they're just going to your point about order taking, they're going to tell me what we're going to write about and it's going to be fine. And so, that is partly why I became a professor too, is because I was a little disillusioned by how different the field was versus what we learned in school. I found it very different. And so I didn't want that to happen to anybody else. And that's why I became a professor, truly, was to help close that gap.
Yeah. No, and I have a lot of respect for professors because,
Mm.
I mean, they have their work cut out for them, so
Oh, it's fun. It is fun. It's a lot of fun though.
I think it'd be rewarding, when you find, there's some students that really, just lock in and they're like,
Mhm.
you know, they stand out. So, we were talking about we just talked about writing. I know this really wasn't on your list, but for me, in my
Yeah.
mind, it's always been a foundational skill for PR pros. And I know, yes, AI is out there. I'm really hoping that, students and young professionals and any professional is not counting on AI, to do their writing for them and their thinking, therefore, because writing is thinking. So,
Mhm. I mean, for me, my policy in my classes across, whether it be undergraduate or graduate students, they can't draft their first drafts in AI. It has to be original thought. They can wordsmith though. They can run it through Chat GPT and say, what is the tone? Could you tighten this up? I mean, I'm okay with that. It's just a tool in that way. And Grammarly is like that too. But no, all of their first drafting has to be original. There are certain things in our field that AI will never be able to replace, like a press conference. a crisis comm, an in the moment interview, right?
Mhm, mhm,
So, you and I talking right now, I can't have chat GPT like come out of my mouth. It has to be so I knew what you wanted to talk about. I had to do some research. I had to think about what stories I wanted to tell, right? So,
mhm,
when you say about writing is and thinking, I think it's critical for employers, professors, anybody who's working with communications professionals. Make sure you make them have experiences with the on the fly in the moment comms. And that comes in, like you said, like presentations, that comes in press conferences, that comes in um, having reporters come to your classroom or to your job. If I was a communications office, I would bring some reporters in for lunch and be like, okay, these are our clients, or this is what would you want to hear from us, right? So that
mhm.
people can have access to that, and prepare for it, because AI is not going to be a crutch for those in the moment situations.
No, and I think when we give up, again, to me, when I sit down to write something, I'm thinking through it, right? I'm working through
Right.
my thoughts because I may have a lot of ideas in my head, but until they're on paper, I'm really not able to maybe organize or really hone in. It just really helps me, and I think other people as well, kind of just collect their thoughts and kind of get to the point, really,
Yeah.
because again, I feel like, it's hard to be put on the spot, and talking is different than writing
Mhm.
because it's I don't it's hard because I'm at heart a writer, so the verbal communication, it doesn't always flow like the writing does for me, and, but I do think obviously the 2 are related, and I feel like, the writing is important in so many different ways in a PR and comms marketing role, so, you're writing stuff all the time, and
Yeah.
I don't necessarily think that you're always gonna wanna use AI to, create whatever it is that you're writing, so
Yeah, I mean, it's just the way I look at it is almost as like an editing tool, but it shouldn't be a generating thoughts campaigns tool. Um,
yeah.
one thing I think it helps with though is if in a simulation, like a crisis comms simulation, you could say like these are the 3 points that I would like my spokesperson to make. How could that be perceived by audiences? Like you can talk to it in that way to kind of maybe refine your thoughts. But again, it comes after, in my opinion, you've already decided what you want to do, what you want to write.
Yeah, right. At least take a pass at it, I
Mhm.
mean,
Oh,
the
for
other
sure.
thing is you're not gonna grow if you're not actually doing
Right.
the work yourself, you're not really gonna evolve and, be able to, learn and grow in your career, so, I don't know, I just feel like it's giving over a lot to, you're giving up a lot when you do that, so
Yeah, and I mean, I have a distinct memory of a piece I wrote, a feature story in undergrad, and I misspelled my source's name, and my professor wrote, "This would have been an A, but I'm giving you a D." Funnily enough, my previous name, my maiden name, was 9 letters long, and she had actually misspelled my name. The professor did, and you know what? I could have made like a big deal about it. We had a really good relationship, and I respected her a lot. But I was just like, "This is." I remember taking that lesson, and then years later, I misspelled the word obstacle on a subject line to the New York Times. And this New York Times reporter found my boss, forwarded it to him, and he was so mad at me. And, I tell my students these stories of like, then it went back into my head of that D that I got because of misspelling a source's name and, things like that. So I tell my students, so on a positive part with AI, and I tell young people this, you have no reasons for spelling errors. All of your writing needs to be perfect because it's here now, right? So, there's that positive part of all of that sweating over typos or misspellings or being reamed out because you had a typo.
yeah.
That's over, thank God, for younger people.
Oh, man. I don't know. That's, yeah, no. I it's funny when a reporter, like, claps back for something like that.
They
I
should
think
have
to
though.
myself
I mean, I was I and again, all these things, like, at the time, I remember I went home and cried, of course, I was in my 20s.
mhm.
but also that, in my opinion, I've seen this sort of lessen a little bit. Of course, you can't publish a million things with typos or errors or incorrect grammar, if you're a comms person. However, because people produce so much content now, I think there's a little bit more grace for when there is a typo or, something
Yeah.
maybe whatever than there was even 5 years ago. I mean, I remember it being the biggest deal when we would hire people to give them a writing test. And if they didn't pass it, we couldn't hire them.
Yeah, no, I see what you're saying there, because I feel like, I feel like, again, there ought to be, if everything else is good, then that might not be
Yeah.
the deciding factor, that might not be fair, so,
Right.
yeah, that makes sense. Let's talk about listening, because I feel like this is a very important skill, and
Mhm.
again, we talked a little bit about it earlier, but people are just, their minds are all over the map, and I feel like focusing, listening, engaging before you even decide what questions you wanna ask, hear what the other person is saying, and take it in, and so let's talk about that.
Yeah, so I mean, in listening and perspective taking, this is actually one of the workshops, one of the more popular workshops that Rachel and I offer at Gen Spark. And a lot of it has to do with intergenerational expectations. And, for the first time ever, we have boomers, Gen X, millennials, and Gen Zers all together in one place. And the cultural, societal, technological things that we've seen change in the last 15 years is monumental, right? So perspective taking and thinking about somebody, like I was telling you my earlier example of, okay, maybe somebody can't translate a PDF, but look how hard it was for them when they came out of school, right? Or similarly, maybe a millennial boss is saying, gosh, my new employee leaves at 5 and then shuts their phone off. I can't reach them till the morning. In their era, they were raised to set boundaries, right? Everything that they see is about setting boundaries and knowing your worth. And, so you have to be able to listen to somebody and figure out, like, what are they seeing, what is their culture of their generation, right? Well,
Mhm,
how are their belief systems formed, and then work within it, not try to combat it or compete with it. um,
mhm.
and so again, back to your point, asking really great questions or not taking things personally, or getting outside of your own algorithm is probably the most effective thing that I could say people could do to be a productive employee.
Yeah, again, I feel like not only are people scattered, it's also about a desire to hear each other and try
Mm,
to understand what the other person is trying to convey without an agenda, without your belief system maybe getting in the way, just at face value, listening, and then coming back and having a dialogue or asking the questions. And it takes respect on both sides, I think, so.
of course. Yeah. Yeah,
But yeah.
and also too, I think in our field, it's like media outlets do have bias. It's been proved over and over again, right? So maybe as a PR person, maybe you're working with a reporter from an outlet that you don't agree with, or you wouldn't like the way that they take the story. But it's up to you to figure out if your audience maybe does read that outlet or follows that reporter, and you've got to kind of be able to work within that and
Mhm.
still get the job done and still do so professionally.
Right. Yes, I mean, you can have a all the beliefs you want in your
Mhm.
outside work, but
Yeah.
no, sometimes they do bleed over a little bit, but it's still the listening part. I feel like we have to at least try to make our best effort at understanding, what is being asked, and then coming back and maybe asking, intelligent questions about,
Mhm.
why are we doing this? Or, what is the goal and how will we measure, and all those things. Um, so what else? What else do you think? We've talked a lot about intergenerational workforce and how that impacts all of this. What else do you think it's important, in focusing, on, younger PR pros and those just entering the world of work? What do you think is important beyond what we've talked about so far?
Well, I mean, I'm gonna end this on a positive note, and this is something that I say a lot to my students. If you read any of the articles I post on LinkedIn or through the PR Club blog or anything, I think it's a really exciting time to be in the communications industry. I know I came out of school 20 years ago, and it was at a renaissance. It was 2006, and my first job out of school in the industry was online advertising, and we had an ad server, and we were doing online content and publishing, content just for the sake of publishing content. And then I moved to another firm where they were doing podcasts and webcasts, and all of this kind of stuff was just bubbling, and I was not taught about that at all in school. And I think that's not a slam on my institution, it's just it was moving so quickly. And I think that the learning social media and creating content, it's been there for a while now. But now we're moving into, short form video, and everybody has to do short form video. Like reporters have to have short form videos. Everybody has to know a little bit of basic design or get really, really fluent at Canva. Results oriented communication. So I like that you keep talking about measurability. Putting out a press release and getting one media hit, you can't really just do that anymore. If you say, well, nobody saw this press release, you have to have 4 or 5 other tactics that you're going to get out there to make sure that your message is populating in front of people you want it to, right? So I think right now is a really exciting time to be in the communications field. I get sad when I see that parents find it as one of the fields that will be replaced by AI. I think it's going to change because of AI, but not be replaced. So I would encourage anybody who's thinking about a field in PR or a career in PR or communication or strategic comm to go for it, especially if they're a creative, critical thinker, because it's a really cool time. We're changing a lot of stuff in the way that people work, and it's fun.
Yeah, I think we're kind of seeing a renaissance for
I do
PR
too.
jobs because, I mean, the focus on being able to communicate clearly and also not putting your foot in your mouth or speaking it out of turn.
Yeah.
So we're critical to that type of communication. And for the C-suite, they really need to be factoring in, the PR council before they get out there and start opening their mouth and perhaps, saying the wrong thing. So I think it's a really important role, and I think it's only going to become more vital and more important because we are communicating more on video, and
Yeah.
you are seeing more executives kind of caught on their feet and speaking in the moment, and they have to be able to do that, and we can really help with that. Help coach them and help counsel them and all of that. So it's actually I think it's a fun time to be doing what we do, and, I mean, there's always a little stress involved, but
Yeah, I mean, it's true. I mean, it is a fun job. You get to make stuff, you get to talk to people, you get to travel a little bit depending on your industry, you get to go to events. You get to think about stories that are shaping people and their mindsets. I mean, it's a really neat job. And if it was easy, then everybody would do it. But it's it is a little bit of a grind, but it's worth it, I think. I think it's still a very viable field. I think that we have, the next generation is coming up and they're really creative, and they think fast and they think on their feet. And
Mhm.
just bridging that gap from classroom to career is what we're here to do, and hopefully we can continue doing that.
It's never boring.
No, no.
And every day could be a little different. So, and again,
Absolutely.
if you don't like one industry, look at another industry.
Mhm.
Maybe you like being on call, or maybe you would rather not be on call as much. So, there's a fit for everyone, and I would just encourage people to explore and look at
Yep.
the options, and don't open up yourself to different opportunities that come your way, and yeah. So I think we're on the same page there. So
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So we learned 2 things. We like Ohio, and and we think it's an exciting time to be in PR. If anybody's still listening, those are the key takeaways.
I just wanna thank you so much for being here, Christina. I thought this was a very helpful, and insightful conversation, and I hope people will follow you. I put the links, in the comments, and, hopefully people follow you on LinkedIn and check out GenSpark Solutions if they need some help. And, yeah, thank you so much for being here.
All right. Well, thank you for having me, and keep on doing what you're doing. You're bringing great conversations to the industry, so we appreciate all the work you do.
Oh, that's very kind. Thank you so much. And thanks everybody for tuning in, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Okay. Bye-bye.